Hello everyone. Hello and welcome to our inaugural Workplace Excellence Series webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Helen Vane and I'm owner of GoGecko Recruitment. We provide resourcing, recruitment and retention services for small and medium-sized companies across the Sussex market, giving you guys the clout of a large corporate to attract and keep people without the ongoing financial commitment. I'm super passionate about finding people who stay and helping create environments where people want to stay. And Claire and I share the same values. So it was a massive no-brainer when we decided to collaborate together to bring this series to you. So I'm going to pass you to Claire to introduce ourselves. And I'm also thrilled to have John Ryan with us as well, who I will introduce shortly.
Thanks, Helen. So I'm Claire Elms from Inspire You Wellbeing. So we help with improving mental fitness to improve people's performance. So whether that is individuals or organisations. So we do anything from looking at your staff strategy right through to really working with you at your workplace culture. So for us, it's anything to do with people, all about helping your people to become the best versions of themselves and be as top performing and top performing as possible. And Helen and myself have been talking about this for a long time. This has been the brainchild of ours for a little while, hasn't it, Helen? So I'm really excited that we are bringing this to you guys now, and I'll pass you back to Helen to introduce John.
Thank you, Claire. And yeah, it has been a brainchild for a while, and I'm also really pleased that it's actually happening. So, and John has agreed to speak as well, and I'm really thrilled because I've seen John speak myself at a conference, and I did a cheeky ask, and he has come up trumps. So thank you so much, John, for being here. John's a speaker, author, entrepreneur, founder, and CEO of Healthy Place to Work, and co-author of Make Work Healthy. And his presentation is brilliant. So we're looking forward to seeing that shortly. But first of all, I know we've promised you some tips and tricks on how to recruit the best people, and that's my bag. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I do in order to attract people to your companies. The first thing really is getting your value proposition right, so that you know the kind of people that you actually want to attract into your business before you even start, and then work through some kind of spec as to what that looks like. But really, it's also then taking your message out to the wider population and branding your company as an employer of choice, because most people are not about just looking at a job spec and going, oh, that's what the kind of job I'm looking for. They're about where they're working, what they're going to be doing in that company, and what that culture looks like to them, because we work a lot of hours, unfortunately, although John's got some tips on how not to work a lot of hours, which I'm looking forward to. But I think it's really important to get the brand of your company really right, so that you attract people that actually want to work for you, and also repel people who aren't right for your culture as well, so that you don't waste any time in the recruitment process. Any thoughts, John and Claire?
Just straight off, did you say that I tell people how to work less? Because that's not the deal. Just so that you're clear, okay?
Sorry, I thought it was something.
But honestly, the one thing that really bothers me is that the people have this idea that it's either, you're relaxing and taking it easy, or you're working really hard. I actually think both of those can be mixed together, yes. Right? I actually, some of the healthiest people are the people who are working long hours because they're doing the right stuff at the right time, which plays into their skill set. They've got a passion for what they do. They've found their flow. It's just fun for those people. There's other people who are working very little hours and they're bored out of their tree. They hate their job. They hate their culture. They hate the leadership. They hate their manager. It's miserable. And so it's not about working less time. It's actually about trying to make sure that you're matched with the organization. That's the thing that really matters. Finding the right role, the right work that gives you a sense of purpose and passion, and that then comes across. And you can actually end up the day really tired, but a sense of personal satisfaction that you've contributed something really worthwhile. So that's what I'd say as an opening. This isn't a case of like, you know, well-being on one side and productivity on the other. It's all together.
And I completely agree. And you said something really interesting there about flow. And it's something that I talk a lot to people internally and externally about knowing what makes you and gets you into flow creates a much more productive situation for you, but also means that you're happier and therefore healthier because you're working to your strengths rather than trying to kind of fit yourself like round peg into square hole, so to speak. And I've been there, and it's a very uncomfortable place to be.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You end up.
And I think, Claire, you were saying you do DISC and the like, because again, that's about figuring out people's strengths and trying to stay away from their weaknesses. So I mean, that's perfect.
When we're looking at getting people, because quite often when you're not just recruiting, but when you're looking at people in job roles, often people are in the wrong roles. And it's really interesting when you go into an organisation from the outside, you can have a look and you can go, oh, you've got someone really analytical working in a people-faced role. They don't like working with people, but they're really good at analytics. So you can kind of look at where people's strengths are and really align jobs. And one of the things that I really support people with, which is similar to what you're talking about, Helen, in terms of the value proposition, is if they've got DISC or Insights or any of the other profiling providers where they can literally like help people to look at strengths and weaknesses and personality profiling, you can really start to craft a role. Like I did some recruitment myself at the beginning of the year, and I knew exactly the personality that I wanted. I knew exactly what skill sets I needed. I knew exactly what I wanted. And I think quite often we go, oh, this is the gap in our job, in our system. This is what we need to fill, but we don't think about the skill set of the person filling it, and we don't think about their values, their ethics. You know, like there's so much to kind of focus on that goes beyond the pieces of paper that they have and the qualifications that they have. And obviously, like those things are important in certain roles, but it's more about, you know, like I do less of a formal interview process, and I'd like, you know, there's so many jobs now that are doing 3 or 4 days of like assessments and interviews and things like that, and I just don't know whether you get the full sense of that person from doing those kind of interview processes.
And out of interest, can I be cheeky and ask you, what is your profile, DISC-wise?
My profile? I've got I've got a unique profile, actually, like everybody has. Like we're all part of all of the sets. So DISC is like, there's 4 parts of DISC. There's a D, an I, an S, and a C. And I'll bore you to tears with it, but I won't go too much into it today. But I'm a combination of I and S, but I also have, so it's like a people focus, but the energizing, enthusiastic part of me jumps out quite a bit. But I'm also an action taker. So I dip into the D, which is focused around action. So I like collaborating, which is why I'm doing this with Helen and yourself, and not kind of threatened. I think some people feel quite threatened by people that do the same kind of thing, but I just think we all add something different to it. But for me, it's the action that I kind of dip into, which is quite different from my usual style.
And Helen, have you done a DISC profile?
I've actually done talent dynamics, so which is another personality assessment, and I'm a supporter in that. So I'm a good leader, a good mentor, someone who really lifts people up and highlights them as you know, the people in the business who should be being shouted about, rather than the one that needs to have all of that done for them, if that makes sense. So, but
I think it's so important that people do that and understand what are their, you know, key attributes and behaviours and situations. Oh, I'm a red. I'm a
you're an insights guy.
If you get in my way, I'll kill you.
Okay, noted.
We're glad we're online, John.
At the weekend, I'm an S.
See, because I have my action, I do work quite well with reds. I find that like I can creatively and constructively challenge reds, and I'm not scared about that side of things. Whereas a lot of people in my profile find reds really hard to manage. So I think we're talking language that probably a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah.
So I think it's that process of like really understanding yourself and how you communicate with others.
Yeah.
It's an amazing tool in terms of working with workplace culture. So if people don't have anything like that and they have no idea what we're talking about, please reach out to us. We can bore you to tears with all the information, and it would be really useful. I think everyone should have some sort of profile.
Absolutely.
There are free ones online, but they're not very good. So I think you need to pay for one to get the proper shebang. And what I like about DISC is that it gives you a lot of what's called EQ, so emotional intelligence coaching within the platform. I've worked a lot with insights as well, so I'm well aware of the colours. And there's also a splodge one as well. I can't remember what that one's called.
There's loads of them. There's
loads.
and I, like, some of them are really complex, like the MBIT, where you ask people, and they give you a bunch of letters and they have no idea what it stands for. But I used to deliver DISC. I like it. It's a nice, cool, sort of easy one to kind of get your head around and use on a constant basis. But for me, I think the piece that's missing is career guidance in schools. I think it's awful. I think people are coming out of school and they haven't a clue what they want to be. And we force people to make a decision about, university, or if that's your choice, or if it's some other, when they're about 17 or 18. And I don't know about you, but I actually think you couldn't get a worse time in your life than when you're 17 or 18, when you have no idea who you are. And unfortunately, you can get sort of honed into a particular role, and it can be difficult to get out of it. So I think one of the things that I love about the workplace now is that people are waking up to the fact that there's no problem if somebody has swapped over careers left, right, and centre. It's not a weakness; it's a strength. And if there's gaps where they've gone travelling or something, again, that's a winner. So I think we have to rethink those usual old-fashioned ways of thinking about talent and the like. And we have to rip up the rule book and start all over again, because workplaces are generally pretty awful and they just need to improve.
And I would completely agree with you. And I do quite a lot of work in schools and colleges, giving students a real life view on what they need to do, and saying to them, I said to someone the other day, life is like spaghetti junction. It's not like a linear line that you follow from step by step by step by step. So the more skills that you have in order to really make the most of the opportunities that come along in those curves and twists and turns of life, the better equipped you'll be to live life to the full.
Can I take you in on something here right now?
Yeah.
There's nobody listening, so my daughter actually she's come home from an interview for an internship, and one of the questions was, where do you see yourself in 10 years time? And I was kind of going like, I haven't a clue where I'm going to be next week. Like, that's how fast the world is changing. Yeah. So I was sort of saying like if you're asked that again, just sort of say you want a bunch of transferable skills, you want to be completely agile because you haven't a clue what's happening, and you want to be able to have the skills to deal with it whenever it happens. And that idea of like the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, it's just so dated. And the type of questions that organizations are asking are just like back in the old days. So honestly, it's about sort of taking a completely new approach to this, because the organizations, if you want to attract, if you want to retain, and if you want to have people completely engaged, you've got to do this differently, because what worked in the past isn't working in the future.
And that's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, my daughter's coming up 8, and they were asked last year. So when she was like in year 2, what she wants to be when she's older. And she came home in tears. She didn't know. And I was like, well, you don't need to know. But because they had so much, they didn't give them these are all the careers that you can do. It was like this, like, what do you want to do? And I think it's really overwhelming for people. And a lot of, I have a lot of placements that come. We've got a couple from the schools at the end of July. They're coming for a week. And for me, it's about giving them like experience to everything that's out there.
Absolutely.
Like,
exposure.
go and do a business networking event where you meet an accountant and a photographer and a recruitment person and an office worker and a this and a that, and then you have conversations with them, because you don't know these jobs exist. There's a book that they go, these are all the careers you can have, or there's a career test, and it's like, right, now you need to know what you want to do. I just think it's crazy.
You've got to follow your energy, you know. I think that's the biggest thing, sort of, and that's where your interests lie. I know the only person I think that actually breaks that rule is David Beckham. Seemingly, when he was 7, he was asked what he wanted to be, and he wrote down on a piece of paper, and the teacher still actually has it. He said he wanted to be a professional footballer. He wanted to play for England and marry a pop star. So, like, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, sure it isn't.
I mean, that's incredible, right? But I guess the other thing within creating goals that are so fixed like that are, you know, society norms, I guess, is like, you know, what happens when you get to those goals? You know, like if you'd said to me 10 years ago, what's your goal for the next 10 years? There's no way I would have said I'd be sitting here talking to you lot and doing this today. You know, there's
thank you.
I
think
so anti-presenting anything, and if I didn't have a written sheet of exactly what I was going to say and read off of it, then I wouldn't be able to do anything like this. So I think, you know, we evolve as human beings, don't we? And we develop these skills to be able to change, and that's like that whole piece you said about the agile, you know, skill set and things, I think is just so important. Like it's about doing something that you love. So many people are in jobs that they don't love.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about doing something that gives you that energy, gives you that focus to get in the zone. And when you're in that kind of flow zone, like you feel pretty unstoppable really, but it's like there's always these obstacles that come in the way that stop you from staying in there for long periods of time.
But equally, you know, I'm just thinking there's loads of people who probably listen to something like this and they're kind of going like, that's, you know, my work is boring as hell. I'm never going to, you know, kind of get that sort of sense of purpose and passion from it. But I think it's really important because some people just have to pay the bills, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that you understand that the work and workplace can be a stress-rich environment, right? So if you find yourself in a job that's a bit mundane and boring and tough, it's really important to have the mitigating factors that make it possible to actually enjoy that work. And I often think about people who are like under massive pressure, let's say in the NHS or the like, and, you know, dealing with really difficult situations in the or whatever they call that nowadays. And it's that idea of what are the things in your workplace and work life that actually can mitigate those major stresses. So trying to have that balancing factor, and people and the supportive environment and, you know, a manager who actually helps and supports you rather than micromanages you is kind of the order of the day. So that's one of the things we've really noticed from the analysis of organizations. Okay, it's a kind of macro analysis. And what we find is the people who are really enjoying their work environment are the people who have a brilliant manager, and the people who aren't are the ones who have a poor manager. So that role is critically important. So before you join any organization, interview the manager. Honestly, you know, it's really, really important, because if you generally will get a fair idea, unless the person is really good at hiding who they are, they'll very clearly show who they are fairly quickly. And sometimes if you don't click, honestly, don't bother, you know, because it's too important a relationship. I know I was at something recently and I was trying to get the data set, the research that he was quoting, but he was saying the relationship you have with your manager is actually more important to your health than the one you have with your doctor.
Absolutely.
You know, so
I don't know if you've seen the research on the Great Resignation, but when the whole Great Resignation of 2020, 2021, post-COVID, you know, we're going to talk about that in a bit anyway, but the research from there is that 96% of people have left because their manager is not supporting them. And that is a massive stat, and that is a massive problem that, you know, and I talk as well about people like making sure that they interview the organization just as much as they're interviewing you. You need to decide whether this is somewhere that you want to work in the same way. I think that's one of the key things, Helen, isn't it, that's changed in terms of recruitment. It's about the person understanding whether or not they want to work for the organization anymore. And that means that the organization has to up the game in terms of what they're offering, because it's not just about a salary and a title anymore. It's much more about the culture and the benefit system and how they support people's well-being, and what they're doing to look after their people, that people are actually looking at now, and people can choose to be choosy.
I would say 100%. And we do the way that we recruit is very 50-50. So it's 50% about what the company wants, but it's also 50% about what the person wants, because that's the only way that you're going to get longevity. Because if you're only looking at what the person wants out of the company, they're not going to stay very long, because they'll be generally about themselves and what they want to happen. And if you're only looking about what the company wants, then that person is never going to be happy. So it's very much a two-way street from a recruitment perspective. It has to be. And I would absolutely agree. Everybody that we speak to, they're not money motivated, most people. Yes, they need money to live and they want to earn their value. Absolutely, 100%. But none of the people I speak to, unless they're in front end sales, talk about money first. No one. Everyone talks about, well, what's the company like? Who am I going to be working for? How does that work? And flexibility is huge now as well. So, hybrid, and I know, John, that you've got some thoughts on hybrid working, remote working, and all of that kind of stuff. But we're not asked for remote working very often, but hybrid is a big thing. Like, how many days can I work from home? How many days am I in the office? And it does create a bigger pool of candidates from a hybrid perspective, because people will travel a little bit further if they're only doing a few days a week in the office. But I know that
let me tell you, they want you back.
Yes, they do.
It's absolutely happened. I'm seeing it every single day. The organizations, they've kind of done it for long enough, many of them, and they're kind of going, okay, I've had enough. I want them back. Now, this is a lot of control freak sort of CEOs who just have had enough of not being able to see the people in front of them. And we have to have smart ways of getting over that. I was with one company in Denmark, and they have basically in their office, they have a red and green light. And basically when they want to do the Pomodoro technique, I don't know if you know it, it's the kind of, the tomato that you spin around to the timer. But they work in work sprints, and they put on a red light to say, stay away, I'm in a work sprint for 40 minutes, and a green light, it's okay, you can come and talk to me. But when they're going into that work sprint, they pop on the screen all over the company what they're working on. So they call it working out loud. And that's really useful in a remote working environment if people actually share what they're working on. Because if you're not in front of me, I am wondering, are you, I don't know, home and away, watching that on telly all day, or are you at the
Are you wiggling the mouse? We all know the techniques, don't we? We all know everything. Do you know there's mouse wigglers you can buy on Amazon?
Yeah. But so, it is really difficult to be super productive at home because you have to be super disciplined. And it suits some people and it doesn't suit others. But one of the things I've noticed is that I'm sort of preaching to these CEOs that it's really important to hyper-personalize the engagement with people and let them have say and, control over how they work, where they work, when they work, who they work with, and the like. Once the job gets done, that's all that matters. But there is a piece around culture, and there is a piece around innovation, and there is a piece around learning and tacit learning, and particularly with the newer generations in the workplace, because if there's nobody in the workplace, they're not learning that sort of stuff. So we need to actually make the workplace a compelling proposition, so that it's not just a case of me replicating what I do at home in another location that's, an hour further away from my house, where I have to go to work through traffic and costs and all of that. It's got to be something different. It's got to be somewhere that I'm getting excited by going, and I'm adding value in a way that I wouldn't if I was sitting at home. So I think that's one of the things that's been most interesting when we're working with organizations, is to get them to reshape and rethink the workplace so that they can get more from people. And the big thing when you're talking about the newer generations coming into the workplace, the big question that we're hearing again and again is they're sort of saying, yeah, money and pay and all that, they're kind of like hygiene factors. What I really want to know is, what is your sustainability story? And some organizations are going, say, are what? It's like they're not ready for that conversation, and they need to be ready for that conversation, because the newer generation, thank God, actually are thinking about looking after the planet, but not only the planet, but also people and the part that people play in terms of ESG, the social, the S. It's really important that organizations can prove to people that they really do care about them, because there's two questions, statements in the Healthy Place to Work assessment. One is, do you believe that the senior leaders in this organization actually care about your health and well-being? If that's a low statement score, generally those people don't care about the organization in return. That it's a two-way street. If you care about me, I'll care about the organization. If you don't, I won't. And the other one is whether or not they're role models for healthy behaviors. And that's what we want from our leaders, to be role models for healthy behaviors. And understanding that's a really broad definition of what a role model is. It's how you run the organization every single day of the week. So they're two biggies. If people are coming to interview, be ready for that question.
I was there.
And I think it's interesting, the move towards ESG now is massive, isn't it, compared to, you know, even pre-COVID, like people weren't thinking in that way. And now it is all about sustainability, about B Corps, about, you know, showing that you've got social impact, that you're making positive change. And I think there's also a move away from the 9 to 5, and in terms of like looking at hours and making sure that your energy levels, you know, some staff prefer to work a couple of hours on a weekend or a couple of hours of an evening, and that's where their energy flow is at their best for deeper work.
Yeah.
And so it's about allowing that to happen. And if somebody wants to go and get their hair cut during the day, if it's an organization that can be flexible around those things, or, you know, if there's people with caring responsibilities, or, you know, all these different things that people have in life now, it means that maybe you want to go and do a workout during the day, or, you know, nice days you might want to go and have a walk for an hour and then do a little bit of work in the evening to compensate. And it's about companies learning to be a bit more agile about this stuff and being less stuck on, like, you have to be in the office 9 to 5 and you have to do it like this, because there's no rule that says that. Like, whose rule is that?
That's it. It's go with your energy, right? And the big thing that we're seeing, we do work with the C-suite in organizations, whereby we get them to wear an Oura ring. And so we measure all their vitals for the month and then have a one-to-one coaching session with them. And what's really clear is, number one, they're not getting enough sleep. And that's really bad for decision making and immoral decisions, by the way. It also is telling us that the chronic levels of stress that they're experiencing throughout a day are huge, and they don't see it, they don't manage it, so they don't understand that. And the big thing is that they're not getting recovery. And so this idea that recovery is a bottle of wine on a Friday night on the couch, that's actually, funnily enough, it's not the best way to do it. So we talk about, you know, if you want more from your staff, you have to give them more, and more being multiple moments of recovery throughout your day. And that's really, you know, work sprints and then go and do whatever the hell you want to do. You got to take those moments, multiple moments of breaks where you can actually pet your dog, throw a stick, whatever, go for a walk. And the big thing, you know, we get all the data back from employees and they're sort of saying, I'm not fit. And then you do some background checks, or not background checks, do you hear me? You do some background analysis.
You're stalking now.
Yeah, exactly. You're actually sort of doing semi-structured interviews, basically, is what about, to get a bit of qualitative data on top of the quantitative. And what becomes clear is they're sort of saying, I simply don't have the time to be fit. And you're sort of saying, okay, so the most important job you have in this world is to stay fit and healthy. That's all that matters, right? Everything else comes next. So the question is, can you build fitness into your day with all of your habits throughout your day? And that's the art of this. So I think I mentioned to you, Helen, in one workplace I was in Dubai, they've introduced gym walls. And they reckon that like only 5% of people will ever sign up to a gym, and maybe 1% of them will actually go. So most people don't, right? But for them, this is the sort of mini little gyms that they put in each department, so that you've got 10 minutes, you can go over and lift a few weights, you can do a few stretchy exercises, you can do a bit of yoga on a mat or whatever. It's just putting it there so it's there for people and makes it really easy for them to build that into their day. That's the move that's actually happening here. And those
are great, because they're giving people, like, you know, you've got companies like Vitality. A lot of businesses have signed up for Vitality, where they get access to apps like Fit, where you can have 20 minutes of exercise. You can do anything you want, right? You can Google and YouTube videos till the cows come home, but people don't do it, and it's because it takes effort. And having something like that is completely effortless, right? It's there. You honestly, can go and make a cup of tea, and you can do that while you're having a chat with someone else that's doing it.
Yeah.
Then bring someone else into the conversation. They're doing it because they're there as well, and it just creates that whole different energy in organizations. And I think it's a really interesting thing. So you use the Aura Ring. We use something called First Beat, which is an electrode device, which is very, very similar. It looks at heart rate variability, oxygen levels, focuses on sleep and rest and recovery. You can see when you're in stress and recovery systems. Yep. And I think this is, people don't know where they're at. Like, I hit burnout in 2015. I didn't know it was coming, and I didn't do any, I wouldn't have signed off, because that's a sign of weakness, because that's the culture of the workplace I was in. You know, as soon as someone gets signed off, they then bring someone else in, fresh meat, bring the next person in to do the same, to churn it all out until they hit burnout. And I think life is slowly starting to realize that that's not okay, but we don't know when we're at the point of no return until we're at the point of no return. And so things like, you know, on the smartwatches now, they have them, they're not as good, are they? But you've got the Aura Ring, I've got the First Beat device, they're very similar devices, and they give you, when you're in stress zones, when you're in rest and recovery, there's those brain scans where they show you back-to-back meetings and the impact that that has on the brain. They have all of this stuff now that's there for people. People love seeing their own data.
Yeah,
you know, and I think it's really interesting when you're looking at like things, and you can see, I know if I go and do a presentation to a couple of hundred people, or I go and do a workplace event, or I go and do some networking, I can't go back and do a meeting. I need recovery time because of the social energy that's required.
Absolutely. Yeah, big time. In one place, I think I mentioned to you, Helen, I was in Korea, where they've translated the book. It's mad. And the place we went to, they said, "Oh, we don't have a gym in our workplace. We have a workplace in our gym." So they've actually created that everywhere in the place. It's all fun and activity. So it's as simple as like putting up, you know, a basketball hoop. And it just means that people play a bit of basketball, and that actually can be brilliant for 10 minutes just to recover, and then you're back to work. Or table tennis table. I know table tennis table is nothing new in that, but just they have just equipment all over the place. They have the bikes there. You jump on a bike, do a quick sort of 2 minutes, or the like, a bit of cardio. That's great. So it's how can you and this is because people are so time poor now. I think it's the trick is, like, if you go for a 5K walk, can you plug on earphones and do a bit of learning at the same time? So it's trying to, you know, maximize the opportunities to do this. Now, obviously, you can also go for a walk in nature and just be with yourself and do a bit of mindfulness too. So it's whatever works for you in terms of how you recover. So what's recovery to you, and how can I build this in so that I actually become fitter and healthier? Because the fact is, from a stress point of view, workplace, as I said, is a stressful environment. It's going to get worse with AI. It's taking away all the boring stuff and leaving us to do the hard work, which is really annoying. But the truth of this is, it's about trying to get people to understand, if I'm fitter and healthier, I can actually manage more stress. It doesn't have as big a negative effect on me. Whereas the more unhealthy I become, the slightest thing is going to trigger me to get stressed. And that's where it's all feeding in. The link between physical health and mental health is enormous. So people, the starter, that is to get physically fit.
We've got a couple of questions. Well, one is a statement more than a question. So Paul said, some of the best leaders I've seen will look after their own well-being loudly. For example, they'll tell their teams when they leave early because they were working late the night before. And it's a powerful signal to their teams that that's okay. And Georgina, on the other hand, has said she's agreed with Paul, but she's also said that they've got a COO who, Georgina's in HR, and he wants her to put work hours to do your job in contracts. And he currently starts at 6 a.m. and finishes at 8 p.m. every day, and thinks that if people leave early and go at 5 p.m., that's early, when it's normal hours. She's asked any suggestions on how to broach this subject.
Yeah, I believe
all the time, right? This is that like big. How are we? we have this culture of like, it's the first person that gets in the office and the last person to leave is the best, that they're doing their job the best. I would actually flip it, and I'm sure you would as well, in saying that actually they're not managing their time efficiently enough if they're not able to do the things. Some people like to work that, but it shouldn't be an expectation. There's these, like, the government have crafted 48 hours of, the 48-hour working week is, if you're doing more than that, it's detrimental to your physical and mental well-being. And all they're doing is people, like companies like this, are just signing, like getting people to sign that they'll just work more. But they're missing the point. And it's a really, really big problem, I think, with notifications, with the whole way that systems work now. Is like lots of companies have got WhatsApp groups where they're just pinging into the evening. People are checking emails on their phones. There's a whole big cultural system, I think, in particular in the UK. I don't know what you think, John, from seeing more of a global side of things.
Like, look, honestly, in that case, I would leave that organization, because that's going to be bad for your health. Or bring in 2 jackets and just put one of them on the chair and then go home, because everybody will think you're still in the office. Because it doesn't work. It doesn't work long term. It's bad for you. So I think people need to be more vicious about their own health and well-being, and don't wait until, like you, burning out in 2015. Like, it's chronic. It has huge long-term effects, and the amount of people who are having really bad night's sleep because of work, and the correlations between lack of sleep and Alzheimer's is huge. So what you're doing today is going to meet you in about 20 years time, and it's really important that you just make sure that you're happy with what's coming in 20 years time. Because like, there's people on this call who live to be 100. You need to make sure you have a body for 100, a mind for 100, and a spirit for 100. So that's it starts now. And bad employers and bad workplaces kill you, and it's just too high a price to pay. And there are good employers out there, and there are people who are getting on this journey and understanding, and I thank God we're meeting loads of them who want to be officially seen and certified as healthy workplaces all over the world, and they're doing things differently. And I think we started this conversation sort of saying what really attracts people to a workplace. It's seeing a workplace that's doing things differently and that's presenting a unique offering, and I think that's what's really important nowadays. So I think if you're in a workplace, you've got to actually reshape your employer brand and sort of say, how can we stand out from the crowd and do things a little bit different, and be seen to understand what are the things that make a difference in the future. And the big thing for us is that everybody wants high performance, and high performance is absolutely good for the organization and the individual. Absolutely. However, the key is sustainable high performance. And how do you deliver sustainable high performance? That's the essence to this, and that's why we believe health is the key to that.
And I think in answer to Georgina, sorry, Helen, in answer to Georgina, I think just that process of helping people to become aware, because I think the biggest thing is that everyone assumes that people are going to do the same as what we do. So, what works for me might not work for my team. And I think it's about starting to challenge those thoughts of when they're saying, if there's an expectation of, like, if somebody comments, like we get this all the time in companies where there's shifts where people come in and maybe start at 5 or 6 and then they leave at like lunchtime, and everyone goes, oh, half day, la, 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 la. And it's like, I get it, but all that's doing is making that person feel that they're not doing their job properly. And I think there's something in terms of owning our boundaries, and I know you probably do a lot of work around boundaries as well, John, but one of the big things that we do when we're working with organizations is looking at boundaries. Like, how to create healthy boundaries is about, like, focusing less on hours worked and more on productivity, and ensuring that the workloads are sufficient, ensuring that people are doing the right things at the right times, and that it's okay for people to leave at 5. It's okay for people to leave at 3 if that's in the policy and the organisation, to make sure they go and pick up their children. There's all of these things that we have responsibilities outside of work, and it's about starting to challenge some of these thoughts, because that's all they are. They're processes and thoughts that have been around for a long time that people have got into the habits of doing. But the neural pathways can be changed in the brain as long as they're aware that there are different ways of doing things. And I think that's it's an interesting debate I have with most of the organisations we work with around working hours and making sure that people are doing how do I know they're doing what they should be doing?
Well, something, I think there's a company in Finland called Futurist, and I just love the way they do things differently. They analysed their people and found that their well-being was affected most by really nasty customers. So they fired a whole load of their customers, and they actually then wrote a document, and basically before they bring on new customers, they hand them the document and say, this is what we want you and how we want you to treat our staff if you're interacting with them. If you want to sign that, we'll do business with you. If you don't, we won't. That to me was really brilliant. And the second thing was they actually had loads of rules and regulations, and they just sort of said, this makes HR in this company come across as police officers, right? And that's not what we want. So they ripped up the rule book. And what they did, so one quick example was credit cards. They gave everybody credit cards, and they said, now we're not going to check the credit card bills, okay? But what we're going to do is we're going to post everybody's credit card bill, including the CEOs, on the intranet. And we want you all to go in and have a snoop around and see what we're spending money on. And in the first time they introduced this, in the first 3 months, the bills came down by 30%. So this to me is really important, that you don't need HR as the person going around implementing the rules. What you want is everybody else in the organization. It's the society of the organization. So if there are people who are actually slipping away at 3 o'clock and not getting the job done, the group will let them know. So if you're running an organization properly, it's the group that will come together and say, hey, Claire, you know something? You're saying, oh yeah, it's okay to switch back on in the evening time when my energy is up, but you haven't. So kind of, get with the program, because we're all picking up the pieces from that. And I think that's a much more powerful way of actually getting high performance in a group dynamic. So I think we need new thinking.
I think it's really, really difficult when you have, my husband works for a big international company, and it is about the people at the top have been indoctrinated in that I must be at my desk at 8 o'clock in the morning and I will not leave till 6. And they've been so indoctrinated in this routine, in this culture, that there's an expectation that everybody else will follow. And I think that's what Georgina was saying about her COO, that they are in that zone. And my husband's been asked to come back to work. He's not, by the way, going back 5 days a week because he's a bit belligerent and he's of the age that he can push the boundaries a little bit.
Well, he's got you now to tell him.
Yeah, he has. And I just went, that's an HR disaster. Don't do it. But they did the same thing, forced everyone back to work 5 days a week. But it was because someone up high, as you said, John, was like, oh, what are they doing at home? They can't really be working, despite the fact the company was still running, they were still making money, everything was still ticking along nicely. It's a trust issue stemmed from many, 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 many years of routine and rhythm, that we must be at our desk at a certain time and we must leave at a certain time. And I am very guilty of that too. So, it's really tricky to break out of that and re-educate.
One of the things I think is funny is a lot of organizations are getting their advice from the top 5, these consultancy companies.
Yeah.
And invariably, they are probably the worst places that you can work, because they bring people in really young. They work them to death, and with the promise that one day you might get to become a partner. And obviously, it's a war to get there, and you kill everybody around you because you're going to work your way to the top. And then we meet these people when they're 50, and they're kind of going, what did I do? I just sacrificed my whole life and I got here. And I'm really well paid, but that doesn't give me back the moments in my life that other people were enjoying while I was working. So I think it's really important that people watch, who am I taking my lead from? Who are the consultants that are helping me shape my workplace experience? Are they having a wonderful workplace experience themselves? Or are these organizations, some of the guys at the top are saying, hey, it was okay for me. I had to go through that hell. So you're going to go through that hell too. And they're just keeping those old time hierarchical systems in place. So as I said at the start, I think we need to rip up the rule book and do things differently, because, you know, if you just hear again and again, oh, engagement levels are really, really poor across, you know, the UK, across the world. Of course they are, because workplaces are, you know, pretty crappy. So we've got to do things differently. And when you do them differently, workplaces can be brilliant. So as I say, work can be the worst part of your life or the best part of your life. It can actually destroy you and kill you, or it can actually deliver everything you possibly need, including money and resources, self-actualization, purpose, passion, and brilliant people. So it can be the best part of your life. And that's obviously what Make Work Healthy is all about.
And that's what we try and sculpt, right? Because so many people are not happy in their jobs, and you feel like you're institutionalized a little bit, especially if you've been somewhere a long period of time. You just get used to that being the way that it is. There's loads and loads of stuff now about this right to switch off. And I think 8 to 6 is the like minor end of what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing more is people being contacted on their days off, people being contacted in the nighttime. The last thing they do before they go to bed is they're checking work emails and they're looking at things. The first thing they do in the morning. There was a post on LinkedIn this week which made me laugh, actually, that said, I've checked in with you lot before I checked in with my husband. And the amount of people that will check their phones before they even open their eyes, almost, you know, like before you even had your morning coffee. And I think actually we're creating this culture of always being on, which I think the Aura rings and the First Beat devices are really starting to open and pull apart, because you're like, actually, if you're starting your day like that, you're not performing at the best that you can. You know, It's not sustainable. It's like the stuff that you talk about being sustainable to be high performing is massive. There's loads of books written. There's a really good one I was listening to last week on my way up to the Health and Wellbeing at Work conference called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And it's been on my list of things to listen to for a long time. But they talk very openly about trust. And trust is something that we've really lost in organisations. A lot of organisations are not trusting that the staff are doing what they need to do. Like, you can tell if somebody's done the work or not. You can tell if they've completed their task, if they're working hard enough. And everyone's level of working hard is so different. It's like, you know, what I can do in an hour might take you 30 minutes, it might take you an hour, I don't know, like it might take 2 hours. It's like that understanding that everyone has a different pace of doing things. And there seems to have not been that in a lot of workplaces recently. And that kind of inability to really switch off is really interesting, I think. Mm.
But I think that's coming through from children now as well. I mean, my teenagers are on all the time, unless they're asleep. And then I suspect they're probably on as well, you know, in their brains, because they've been connected to technology for too long during the day. And at schools as well, everything is done through technology. They're not encouraged to go out and be outdoors and breathe the air and see the sunshine and, you know, all the rest of it. So it stems very much from when children are young, right the way through. And there is still this mentality of, you must get, you know, an education, you must get, you know, there's this, it's a pattern. And there isn't any talk, you know, we went to a talk at my son's school and it was all about, you must get your GCSEs and then you must get your A-levels and then you must get a degree. And it's like, these kids are sat there going, oh, I've just been on TikTok for 4 hours. You know, what do you mean? You know, I've digested the whole of the GCSE syllabus in 10 minutes. You know, I don't need to sit in a classroom and listen to this. They find it boring because their brains are completely not attuned to slowing down and digesting things and being about just being present. So I think we've got a problem coming as well from.
I think as Kim says there, I think the manager population is really important in solving this problem, and I think it's not that all managers are bad. In one organization, they said to me, you know, the newer generation of people coming into the workplace, they want their manager to be a psychologist. So we've actually trained our managers to be psychologists.
Yeah.
So it's really about equipping the managers to understand the change that's happened. What we find from talking to organizations is they recognize that the role of a manager has changed, but they haven't changed the role of a manager.
Yeah.
It's really frustrating.
It's the biggest blocker in organizations that I've come across is managers do their job really well, so they get promoted as a manager.
Yeah.
But they have no understanding of how to manage people.
Yeah.
So they're then trying to manage people without knowing how to manage people. But then they don't feel comfortable having difficult conversations. They don't feel comfortable relaying information backwards and forwards. So like someone from the top down says something, but they don't want to upset the staff, so they take it on themselves. They'll just go and do that. Someone from the bottom up says something, they don't want to. It creates a whole kind of crazy in terms of organisations. And I think it's a really, we are expecting a lot more from managers, and that is why, there's all this stuff now about mentoring and coaching managers, because if managers ask the right questions, they can really get in before that becomes a problem. And if they can get in before that becomes a problem, it's not about training people to become necessarily a psychologist, but it is about helping them to understand where there's more layers that need peeling, and understand the kind of coaching questions that they can ask to get the information out of people, because people don't like talking about personal life. There's this whole thing about leave your personal life at the door, was the old saying, wasn't it? And but that doesn't happen anymore. Like, we live to work and work to live, and we need to kind of find that integration that works for us, and everyone will be different with that. And so it's about aligning the values of the organization to make sure that the tasks are still done and that it works for the organization. You don't want people working in the middle of the night, but likewise, you've got to find the balance that works for everybody.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I'm mindful of the time, and we were going to do your little presentation, and we've gone off on a right old tangent.
Yeah,
so
I don't think that's going to happen, is it?
No.
I'll come back and do it another day.
We knew this would happen because we're all talkers.
We'd love
I would love to see your presentation, because I think there's some really good nuggets in it for people, and then we can sum up at the end.
Yeah.
Do you want me to do the presentation? It's probably.
How long is it going to take you, John?
Golly, to do the presentation would be 30 minutes. So I don't think we have the time to do that. I'll come back and do that another time. But people can go to the healthyplacetowork.com website and understand the model and methodology that we use. And if anybody wants to, they can engage. It'd be fun to do that, and it'd be good to work with you guys. So. Thank you both, Helen and Claire, for the opportunity to chat today. Let's.
Is there like one piece of nugget of information from your presentation that like you can get people like excited about? I guess like one thing that.
Well, I don't know if it's the excitement piece, but the whole model is based on salutogenesis. So maybe if we're leaving people today with a word that they haven't heard before, and they can actually go, because it's absolutely changed my life. And the guy who introduced it was a guy called Aaron Antonovsky. And what he did was he surveyed, he kind of had a longitudinal study of women who were in concentration camps during the war. And we wanted to find out whether any of them could lead normal lives afterwards. And what he found was most of them couldn't, which was completely understandable with the horror they'd been through. But 28% of them could. And what he wanted to figure out was what made these people so incredibly resilient in the face of such ultimate horror. What he discovered was that the world saw health as the absence of illness. So if I'm not sick, I'm healthy, right? That's what he called a pathogenic approach to health. So if that's our orientation, we see the world has been full of disease, and our job is to avoid disease, right? So if that's your orientation, you want to reduce risk factors, you want to stay away from disease, you want to isolate from people in COVID times, you want to wear a mask and the like. So he's saying that's all about where you don't want to go, what you don't want to do. He said those women that were really resilient didn't have that orientation. They had what he called a salutogenic orientation. So genic, the genesis is the origins, and the salute is the origins of your health. So what makes you really, really healthy as an individual? They understood this deeply, and they became stronger mentally, physically, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. And that spiritual piece was about having a deep sense of coherence. And what this is, so when somebody gets hit on the head in a football match or something, they become incoherent, right? They don't seem to be lined up at all with their thinking and their thoughts and who they were before and the like. Whereas if you have ultimate coherence, you have actually just found your perfect place. At the start, we were talking about that, you know, when you find yourself in an organization that reflects you and your personality and your values, and the leadership seems to talk your language, the manager supports you, and you get into flow with the work you're doing, that's when you're ultimately coherent. And there's three kind of key parts to that. One is comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness. And the piece that Aaron Antonovsky says is that we're all under stress all of the time, right? But most of the time we can handle it. But now and again in our lives, there'll be peak stresses, right? And the trick is, if I have comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness, I'll be able to get through them. So what that means is when I hit that peak stress, the comprehensibility is, can I actually understand what's going on and actually predict where this is going to go? The manageability piece is about having the people around me who can support me through those really stressful moments. And the meaningfulness piece is that life is tough for most people. The question is, so forget your social media, that's everybody's best life and it's a load of rubbish. Most people's lives are tough, with moments of punctuated by joy, which is great. But if you don't have a sense of purpose and meaning in what you're doing every single day, you're going to find it really difficult to get through. So the art of this is to have that sense of purpose and meaning in your life with what you're doing every single day, and workplace, such an important role in that. So the art of what we're trying to teach people is that this is about the individuals in your workplace and the organization itself, trying to become stronger, physically, mentally, socially, emotionally, and spiritually. And that's what the model of Healthy Place to Work does. So let's not talk about, you know, mental illness. Let's talk about mental fitness. Let's look at the positives and see, can we actually achieve a workplace that actually integrates all of these things and just makes work healthy? Is that okay?
Beautiful.
Amazing. Thank you, John. That was really, really good. Really good discussion. Has anyone just got any other questions that they want to cover off before we go? There will be a recording of this because there's loads and loads of stuff to unpack. My brain hurts already. So we're going to be, and I've already spoken to John at least twice. So we will obviously send out recording, no problem. And also it would be really, really great to understand what the feedback from you all. You know, do you want to see more of the same? Do you want to see more, you know, different stuff covered? We've got 2 more webinars, and we're also doing a roundtable face-to-face discussion, hopefully in November, with Greek food. So that's
our next one, we've booked the date, haven't we, of the 26th of June at 12 o'clock. So save the date and share it far and wide. What we're going to be talking about is resilience and change in organisations, and they're 2 massive conversation topics in terms of retention of staff. How to have a mass exodus of your staffing is to create a massive focus of change, right? So how to do change properly, with also a little bit of an HR slant on it as well. So we have Paul, who's going to be doing our speaker slot for that next one as well. So you know, we want these to be really useful for you. We want these to be full of nuggets of information. I know we all like to have a good chit chat, but hopefully, you know, in terms of the things that I've picked out from this workshop, I've been scribbling a few notes to try and sum it up at the end. But you know, it's about making sure that you are crafting all your recruitment around the values of the organisation, the values and the culture that you want to create, looking at interesting, innovative ways of bringing staff members in, asking some really good questions. John's mentioned a few amazing questions in terms of interview questions, how to really understand the people that are coming to work with you. Do you think that they're going to gel with your organisation and your culture? You know, not just looking at skills. Helen's talked loads about value proposition and making sure that the skills, we talked about profiling, we talked about making sure there's a really good understanding, not just the pieces of paper and the qualifications people have, but that whole piece at the beginning of making sure that person is going to fit your organisation. and also as an employee, making sure that you are happy with the organization. So the interview process should be a two-way process, right? Making sure that you're happy in that workplace as well. And then looking at the retention piece is like things like gym walls, like really being innovative and exciting. Pinterest has loads of ideas. I love a Pinterest board in terms of things that you can do to create really innovative solutions for your teams. Get your teams to help you, because if they've come up with ideas, they're more invested in it as well. So the more that you can sculpt the culture to work for you and them, the better that they're going to perform and the more sustainable they will be. And that whole piece at the end, I love your solution-genic. I can't say it.
Solution-genic.
That's a word I can't say. But John can put it very well. But that whole piece around really crafting things and things is just amazing. So I think there's probably loads of nuggets there for everybody. I'd like to hear from those that are live what their one takeaway would be. And Helen, what's your one takeaway? Is there anything you want to add to that?
Every time I speak to both of you, my mind is blown generally. But I would say I out of the three of us, I'm the one that's a work in progress from the point of view of boundaries and not living my 1980s lifestyle of work, all work and no play. So it's very much looking, for me, my nuggets are boundaries. I look after my health really well, but I would say the boundaries of work and play for me.
Absolutely.
I thought you were going to say wet. 1980s,
wet.
You know? Not work.
Marty,
I was just thinking it's a really nice day. I want to go down the beach now.
Well, I do sea swim, and so does Claire. So probably.
Well done. Wow.
Mental
women.
Listen,
it was a real joy. So let's stay in touch. It'd be great. And if anybody wants to, you can email me at john@healthyplacetowork.com.
We'll stick links in for everything that we've discussed. I know someone mentioned about a link to your website as well, John. We'll stick a link for your book. John's got a book. Buy the book. Links to me and Helen. I'm also offering a free people strategy conversation. So if people are struggling with understanding what the workplace could look like, get in touch with me. Helen's also offering a free strategy session in terms of recruitment. So, we want these things to be as supportive as possible for people,
And Claire, by the way, you were saying that you're scribbling notes and all that. So you just got to get with the program. You've got to use Otter AI or Copilot from Microsoft and just plug it all in, put the recording in. It'll summarize the whole thing for you in seconds. So, and then use that time to recover. I thought it did
it afterwards. Does it do it in the moment?
It does it everything. Honest to God, it's scary. But you can save so much time with these things. So, it's good fun.
Thanks, John. That's John's tip.
No bother.
Georgina wants to come and work for one of us. We'd love her to.
Right. I like. Is it Chloe? You said it's not important about money. Yeah. Come and work for us.
Love is more important. I love it. I love that sentiment, and I think as well the having these conversations and starting to think differently, I think is the start, right? We're on this let's be total world dominations and just try and make everything lovely, but I know it's not as easy as that, and I know a lot of people are resistant to change, and that's where next session is going to be really invaluable of let's deep dive into the resistance and work out what's there, because that's really important.
Cool. I've got to go.
Amazing.
So thanks
See you
a million.
later.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.